What are allowances, really? The allowance item is a part of the house that the owner must specifically select, also referred to as selections. Now, I use the word specifically here because it's very important. What that means is when you go to a supplier, say a showroom locally or even an online supplier, what you will do is you will say, I want that pendant light, or I want that bathtub, or even that brick, that color, that size. This is in contrast to all of the other items that are part of the plans and specifications to build your house. You don't go to a lumber yard and point to the two by fours. Those are not things that you specifically point to. The second part of that is that it is not the materials and labor that are part of the installation of the allowance item. And this is where it gets really tricky with builders. The distinction is this: the allowance item also has to be installed, and there's all this material and labor that is required to install that allowance item, to install that pendant light or that bathtub. And all of those installation materials are a part of the allowance item itself, but it is not part of the allowance amount. It is not in the allowance itself. It is part of what the contractor is to provide for the allowances. And this is where that's one thing that gets tricky. I'll talk about that more later. Number 2, it has not been chosen at the time of the contract is signed. Otherwise, it would be part of specifications. But if it hasn't been chosen at the time the contract is signed, it needs to be accounted for. An allowance schedule is used to show allowance items and their allowed cost. This schedule is attached to and made part of the contract to build. Now, remember one thing about this allowed cost, that is a made up number. It's a guess. The builder will hand you the allowance schedule that they've come up with, and they will say electrical fixtures, $10,000. That is just a guess, so that you know there is an inherent desire for the builder who is bidding a project to come in with a lower bid. So there's a need for the builder to lower the allowances. However, this is the crux of the problem regarding allowances, and really all things home building, is you don't know what you don't know. And let's face it, if you don't really know the first thing about a building contract, you've never read one before, you don't really know what an allowance schedule is, you don't know what a proper draw schedule is, then you really don't know if what you're looking at in these documents is telling you whether or not this builder is going to treat you well.